Most of us like to believe we are good people. We hold doors open. We smile at strangers. We donate when we can. We convince ourselves that, compared to others, we're decent. But what if I told you that you are not as good as you think you are? What if, hidden beneath your sense of morality, there lies a darker truth? A truth you avoid, a truth you excuse, a truth that thought experiments, simple mental games, can expose. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey through some of the most unsettling and eye-opening thought experiments in philosophy and psychology. Experiments that force you to look in the mirror and confront the fact that the line between good and bad is not where you think it is. We grow up with a story. The world is divided between good people and bad people, heroes and villains, saints and sinners. But reality is not so clear. Philosopher Alexander Solzhenitsyn once wrote, "The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." In other words, no one is purely good, and no one is purely evil. The capacity for both lives inside you. But we don't like to admit that, so instead we create illusions. We compare ourselves to others, always choosing examples that make us feel virtuous. We cling to small acts of kindness, while ignoring the larger truths about our choices, our silence, and our selfishness. But when we step into a thought experiment, those illusions fall apart. Imagine this. A runaway trolley is heading down the tracks. 5 people are tied to the rails. If you do nothing, they will die. But there is a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch tracks. On the other track, there is one person tied down. Pulling the lever means sacrificing one to save 5. What do? Most people say, "I'd pull the lever. Better to save 5 lives than 1. It seems logical. But here's the twist. Now imagine that instead of pulling a lever, you have to physically push a man off a bridge onto the tracks to stop the trolley. The math is the same. 1 life for 5. But suddenly, almost no one chooses to push. Why? Because when morality becomes personal, when it involves our own hands, our logic crumbles. The trolley problem reveals something uncomfortable. We are not consistent moral beings. We shift our values depending on proximity, emotions, and fear of guilt. You may think you'd always do the right thing, but when faced with reality, your morality is fragile. Now imagine this. You're walking home, late at night. In the distance, you see a man collapse. He's clutching his chest. He's dying. Do you run to help? Do you call an ambulance? Most people say, "Of course I would." But psychology says otherwise. In 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was murdered in New York City. Dozens of people heard her screams. Dozens saw what was happening. And yet, no one intervened. This became known as the Bystander Effect. The more people witness a tragedy, the less likely anyone is to act. Each person thinks someone else will step in. So here's the truth. In moments where morality is tested, most of us fail. Not because we are cruel, but because we are passive. Because doing nothing is easier. because being good in theory doesn't always translate to being good in practice. Let me take you into another thought experiment, but this one was real. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a chilling study. Participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person whenever they answered questions incorrectly. With each mistake, the shocks grew stronger. The person on the other side would scream, beg for mercy, even fall silent as if unconscious. The participant believed they were torturing someone, but the truth, the screams were fake. The real experiment was about obedience. How far would ordinary people go just because an authority figure told them to? The results: 65% of participants continued delivering shocks up to the maximum level, what they believed was deadly. What does this mean? It means you too are capable of cruelty. Not because you're evil, but because obedience is wired into you. You think you would resist. You think you would stand up. But statistically, you wouldn't. Now let's turn to Plato. He tells the story of Gyges, a shepherd who found a ring that made him invisible. With this power, he could do anything: lie, steal, even kill, without consequences. So the question is, if no one could see you, if you could never be caught, would you still be good? Plato argued that most people would not. That morality is less about virtue and more about fear of punishment and desire for reputation. So ask yourself honestly, do you refrain from doing wrong because it is wrong, or because you're afraid of being exposed? The truth is, you don't need philosophers or psychologists to test your morality. Life gives you experiments every day. When you see a homeless person on the street, do you look away? When your friend makes a cruel joke, do you speak up or laugh along? When you have the chance to help, do you step forward or step aside? Your answers reveal more about your character than your self-image does. So, what do all these thought experiments reveal? That you're not as good as you think. That morality is not fixed, but situational. That your goodness is fragile, inconsistent, conditional. And maybe that's the point. Maybe being human is not about being perfectly good. Maybe it's about recognizing your flaws, your darkness, your potential for failure, and choosing, consciously, to rise above it. Because true morality is not easy. It's not comfortable. It demands sacrifice. It demands courage. It demands honesty. So I'll leave you with this. Next time you're tempted to label yourself a good person, remember these experiments. Remember the trolley problem. Remember the bystander effect. Remember Milgram. Remember Gyges' ring. And then ask yourself not, am I a good person? But rather, am I choosing the harder path when no one is watching? When it costs me something? When it hurts? Because that is where true morality begins.